The National Development Plan sets a goal to eliminate poverty and inequality by 2030. But that deadline is fast approaching with very little progress. Let's discuss this further with Nkosinathi Mahlangu, who's the Youth Employment Portfolio Head at Momentum Metropolitan. Thank you very much for joining us in studio this morning. Let's start with an overall view of the National Development Plan and really why it's so significant.
Thank you very much, Rafiwa. The National Development Plan is very much significant and, looking at the historic, journey of South Africans. And with this particular plan, this is where now we need, tangible actions to help secure the future for South Africans. And this is also, chartered in the Constitution. So it is very much important for us to align with what the National Development Plan, is seeking.
I think out of frustration over the lackluster growth and really how we've regressed as a country because of the corruption and so on, President Thabo Mbeki at some point called it an idea rather than an actual plan in an interview with Dan Moyane. Let's talk about that notion in terms of the stakeholders that are responsible for carrying out the details that are outlined in the plan.
Yeah, thank you for that. A plan with no action is definitely, an idea, as former president has alluded. And in as far as the stakeholders are concerned, this is it's all hands on deck. And this requires all South Africans to commit and be prepared to play a role in making this plan a reality and an attainable one. And for government, obviously, we need government to create an enabling environment. And we also need, corporate South Africa, such as us as Momentum Metropolitan, to play an active role through our socio-economic development programs to also, help fast-track, the goals, as 2030 is just around the corner.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all doom and gloom, I suppose, because there have been some strides that have been made. What have those been over the last few years?
Yeah, we're not where we would like to be, in all honesty. And there has been some ground covered, and there has been some milestones achieved. When you look at human settlement, for instance, we've seen, from the days of the Reconstruction and Development Program, whereby housing, access to housing has been achieved and is still in an ongoing process. We see access to water, sanitation, electricity. And funny enough, I say electricity now, we're having this energy crisis. But we are aiming towards a moving target as South Africans. And we need to also measure in terms of what has been achieved now and what does it take, or what will it take for us to reach the outstanding goals. Hence, we're going towards 2030.
The quarterly labour force survey has shown a consistent drop in unemployment over the last couple of quarters or so. Is that attributable to the National Development Plan in any form?
To an extent, yes. We may not make a reference to the National Development Plan each and every time we reach certain milestones. But looking at the the shift, the slight drop in the unemployment rate, it is something worth noting. But when we look at the bigger picture now, youth unemployment is still sitting at a staggering 61%, and which also requires us to try and fast-track the efforts, that we have put together, through a number of programs and interventions. So we need to try and bridge that gap. Yes, inequality is still there. Unemployment, poverty is still one of the factors that are affecting the country. In as far as linking these small wins to the NDP, yes, because some of these policies that we implement, even us as corporate through our CSI initiatives as the Momentum Metropolitan Foundation, it is coming from what the NDP requires of us.
What about the fact that we are fast approaching 2030, as I mentioned in my intro? Would you say, with what you've just described to us, that we are on track to eliminate issues around poverty and inequality, or do we need to fire every single cylinder that we have to make sure we at least get halfway by the time 2030 comes?
Yeah, when the NDP was adopted in 2012 by Cabinet, 2030 was like long-term plan. And now when you look at how far are we from 2030, it's like, 2030, it's 7 years to go. And are we on track? Well, we are in motion, but at a very snail pace, I must say. We need to also fire all cylinders, and we need all hands on deck. We need to get all stakeholders involved to help us, turn the tide. But one thing we need not do is to, abort mission. We can't abort mission now, but we need to intensify our efforts in as far as what the goals are set for 2030.
Yeah, and as we intensify those efforts, what are the challenges that lie ahead? We need not mention the electricity crisis, but some of the other issues that we're going to face as we try and meet most of the goals set out in the plan.
Yeah, we need to look at what can we do and how do we, collaborate as South Africans in as far as how conducive the environment is, number one, and looking at the role that us as ordinary citizens can play, how in terms of being patriotic towards the goals of the country, and the big role in as far as corporate. I mean, we're looking at the high unemployment rate at this point in time, is to say, what is corporate South Africa doing? We do have initiatives that speaks to skills development, initiatives that also help entrepreneurs to to upscale, to also become the next job creators. So what we need to do is to take stock into saying how far are we from reaching the 2030 goals, and what it is that do we need to put in place as South Africans in order for us to tick some of these important boxes. But obviously it all lies within us pulling together and also being cognizant to the fact that life does happen in between.
You mentioned a very important point there in terms of what is corporate South Africa doing to play its role in meeting the goals or the goals set in the plan. Do you think, just based on your assessment, you are working for corporate South Africa, that there is enough of a partnership between government-related stakeholders and the corporate landscape in South Africa?
Opportunities to engage and bring our worlds closer together are always there. And I mean, speaking from our standpoint as Momentum Metropolitan, is that when we crafted our youth employment or youth empowerment initiatives, we had to look at where are the gaps in South Africa and who can we bring in from a government perspective and also through other, civil organizations, non-profit organizations, to say, how do we make sure that these public-private partnerships are realized, and how do we make sure that we bridge the gap in as far as youth unemployment in the country is concerned. And yes, there are opportunities to partner more and collaborate more, especially with government. But now the trick lies in how do we strategically align? How do we find one another in making sure that we implement these plans, these wonderful plans that we have?
Thank you very much for your time this morning. I've been speaking there to Nkosinathi Mahlangu, who's the Youth Employment Portfolio Head at Momentum Metropolitan.